Ladies and gentlemen, we've often had it said that Mr. Fixfok-ANC will absolutely destroy the ANC, and we are seeing this now before our eyes. Mr. Fok-ANC has recently done a press conference whereby he said the NEC all sat around in a room and talked some bull rubbish to each other and decided some policies for the country. During that conference, he said they came out with some surprising things, such as we should all withdraw from the RCC and possibly the ANC and the EFF should align. It was very telling that after the press conference, the ANC machine kicked into action and basically apologized for everything he said and withdrew every single comment he made, thereby saying, sorry, what he said is kind of true, but not true. Can't really trust him, but this is our real position. And it's become rather interesting to note that Mr. Fixfok-ANC does not actually speak for the ANC at all. In fact, he just talks a giant load of garbage. And joining me to talk about this is Ramon. Hello, Ramon.
Yes, hello everyone. This is the Patriarch Alliance shill number 1. It's quite amazing, Byron. I mean, soon will be shills for Orania when that video drops next week.
Mm.
But yes, it's. We made a video earlier this year where we said Cyril has quietly quit being president and the ANC is on autopilot, and that really seems to be the case because there's no sense that these people are actually working together towards something. So as you said, there was an NEC meeting. Then they came out to say we're leaving the ICC. The president came out to say we're leaving the ICC. And then 2 hours later, they said, no, we're not leaving the ICC. It was a misquote. Now, my friends, a misquote is when you mispronounce someone's name, like Byron does. But to say, I'm going to do this, and then you change it to, no, we're not going to do that, that's not a misquote. That's a sort of change of direct policy. How can it be a misquote? But, it is a misquote because Fixfok-ANC says it. And as we said right at the beginning, Fixfok-ANC is going to destroy the ANC, and that is exactly what's happening.
All right, well, before we talk about that, you know what also has had a change of reversal? That would be Bitcoin. So Bitcoin at the time of trading is actually 6 to 7% up from where it was, and it's now trading just under $30,000 for a Bitcoin. Pretty good news for those of you who invest in Bitcoin. I know Ronaldo will suddenly not be crying anymore. And with that being said, just a word from our sponsor, Bitvice.
Let's be honest, Bitcoin is by far the best performing asset of the last decade, and a lot of people are using Bitcoin to hedge themselves against government overreach and fiat currency debasement, otherwise known as inflation. And that's why the guys over at Bitvice have developed their latest product, Sat Stacker. Essentially, you set a debit order, you accumulate Bitcoin every single month. Your Bitcoin won't be on an exchange, it won't be in anyone's hands, it will be directly deposited into your private wallet. So accumulate Bitcoin today, and every single month you set the price, you set the frequency, Sat Stacker does all the rest. In order to get started, click the link in the description below.
And we're back. So to talk about a little bit more about fixing Fok-ANC, let's actually delve into what he actually said. So the first thing he said is, we want to withdraw from the RCC because we feel at an international stage, it's not actually catering to the effects of Africa. He says that what's actually effectively happening is that the RCC is picking on African states and basically treating them like despots, usually because they are, and they're using the actual international court kind of as a kangaroo court in order to hold those they deem to be non-desirable to account. And an example of this, as we all know, is President Putin. Now, before we discuss this, it is worthwhile just reminding ourselves how we got to this situation. And that is, the BRICS countries are having a conference in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa actually invited President Putin to the event. President Putin accepted. Now they've got a problem because, as members of the RCC, an international arrest warrant has been put out for President Putin for war crimes because of the war or the conflict in the Russian-Ukraine war. So what will South Africa do? Will it arrest him? Will it not? Don't know. So the answer now is, we'll just withdraw from the RCC. But the problem, one, is that according to the roles or the rules of the RCC, you have to give 12 months notice, my friend, to actually withdraw from the RCC, which means even if they withdraw today, they've still got the BRICS problem.
And here's the thing, right? We actually agree with the withdrawal of the ICC. We do think the criminal court is a kangaroo court. It is a criminal court that does prey on mostly, dictators of color. Whereas, in fact, Joe Biden, George Bush, Barack Obama, all of those people should be in the dock at The Hague for war crimes. But unfortunately, they're not, because America is not part of the ICC. So, in fact, by South Africa withdrawing from the ICC, we take we follow within the footsteps of, the West, which we purportedly want to be like. So we agree with the notion of withdrawing from the ICC, but at the NEC elective conference last year, the ANC said, no, we won't withdraw from the ICC. And now 6 months later, they're like, no, we will withdraw from the ICC. And then they changed their mood and said, no, actually, we're not. But the problem is, as you rightly say, if you want to withdraw from the ICC, you have to do it and give notice. And there's a period of time that needs to elapse for this to happen. So it's once again, like, the point is not that the ICC good or bad. The point is the ANC is on autopilot and Fixfok-ANC is trying to be the pilot, and it's just not working out to hilarious results.
Yeah, let's just remind ourselves that Mr. Fixfok-ANC was in charge of a railway network that went nowhere and now exists in fuck all. So Mr. Fixfok-ANC shouldn't really be loose on anything because he really is the world's largest moron. With that being said, he then went on to his next comment, which I must say, even whilst it was occurring, the news came out, I sent you articles to say, man, this stuff is all contradictory. I don't even know what's going on. And that is, the ANC said, well, what approach are we going to take to coalition government? And the first thing they said is, well, we think that coalition government is going to be inevitable now, but we don't like the messy coalitions. So we need to figure out who we actually want to partner with. They then came out and said, well, we will only partner with parties that are primarily liberation movements because they think that they should side with the liberators. Problem is, there is actually only one other main liberating party, and that is the IFP, who aren't exactly the ANC's biggest fans. So who does that leave? Well, that leaves the EFF, who actually have no historical claim to liberation. With that all being said, that didn't leave them for nothing, mate. They just said, okay, well, you know what we can do? We can try to partner with parties of shared value. And those shared values are people that, want their left-wing bias. And so you actually saw Mr. Fixfok-ANC come out with all these comments about how they really want to lean on left-wing dogma, basically Marxism, in which case the EFF is the only logical partner. Having said that, he then said, well, we won't want to work with the DA because the DA is a bunch of racists and we can't work with a racist apologist. To which the question was, well, what is the racism? And he said, well, they don't want affirmative action and BEE. And we think that's racist. So that's actually their beef. Their beef with the DA is that they don't want BEE and affirmative action, self-empowerment bullcrap that we all know is just basically a grift for the elite. They did, however, say that they understand they would actually have to give something to the EFF for this exchange of support, which basically worked out at EWC, didn't it? Now, the crux of this whole entire argument was that effectively Cyril then came out and said, well, actually, we shouldn't really be talking about coalition governments at all because we should be trying to get a majority. And the news came out that this was a fight between the young crowd and the old crowd, and the young crowd wants an EFF partnership, and the old crowd just says, well, let's just win overall, and then we don't need to talk coalitions. So it actually became very confusing. Now, where it really became confusing is that the ANC issued a policy statement or a document afterwards, which basically said exactly what Cyril said, let's just go for a majority. But Mr. Fixfok-ANC went and did a conference and said, we want the EFF partnership. So which is it, Ramon? I'm very confused. Do they want a majority or do they want the EFF?
Well, that's the problem when everyone quietly quits. No one knows what they actually want. And I keep saying, guys, the ANC has sort of given up governing for at least another year till 2024. And then it looks like they're just waiting to see where the chips fall after the election. And only then will they do the horse trading required to run the country. There's no doubt in my mind the ANC still wants to govern the country. They still want to govern the army and govern the police and govern taxation and all that sort of stuff. And they're going to choose the best deal that suits them best. I am not convinced the EFF and the ANC will align at all costs. I think that the ANC is aware that the EFF is much smarter than them. It'll take them over. There'll be like a sort of reverse hostile takeover of the ANC by incorporating it with the EFF. And most importantly, the EFF are a bunch of grifters. They're not hardcore Marxists. But the problem with them is that, well, when they taste real power, they'll just have to go forward with what they've been telling the world for the past 12 years, and they could very well destroy the country. But then again, if both of them get 51% of the vote, 52% of the vote, what can they actually do to the country? That is assuming that coalition will last in the first place, because if it's a coalition just based on grift, it's a zero-sum game. When you run out of money, you run out of the coalition. The DA did say they want the mutual pact to take the ANC out of power. until the PA came on board. Then the DA said, no thanks, we don't want the PA, and now everything's falling apart in that regard. And now the ANC is saying, we'll never work with the DA, they're racists. But both parties looks like it, this is my hunch, it looks like both parties actually are engineering a method for them to actually work together. So in public you say the DA is racist, in public you say with the Moonshot Pact, but in action you're doing the opposite of what you're saying. So I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing things that aren't there, maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's an ANC DA coalition come 2024. And as we said on this podcast a few times, that may not be a bad option.
No, and I think that the likelihood is you are seeing conspiracy theorists. But then, as a far right white supremacist extremist, which we all know you are, Ramon, you, not me, I'm a saint. Anyway, the whole point there is that obviously, as they go forward, they are going to need to do some form of horse trading. But the horse trading that scares most people is the horse trading that the EFF want. And you very rightly point out that the EFF on paper wants some very radical and extreme economic policies. But we've all seen the EFF in reality, and as The Citizen wrote, aren't we lucky that the EFF are actually hypocrites? Because the EFF actually like capitalism. They like the cars, they like the money, they like the partying, they like the grift. But they use Marxist language in order to get them the vote. Now, that Marxist language has started to have a negative impact because what we are finding in South Africa is that the majority of people don't actually want Marxism. They actually just want jobs and peaceful lives. They don't want revolution. And so the EFF is obviously a party in decline. With that being said, as you very rightly point out, at some point in time, if they do actually take power, what that will actually mean is that they may be forced by their political parties to actually do the very things they themselves don't want to do. So, what exactly does that look like in reality, ladies and gentlemen? Well, what it looks like is that basically the EFF goes and tells the most extreme thing to the ANC. The ANC says, we can't do that. There's compromise, and the compromise is never reached. Now, where have we seen this? Well, we actually saw it during the constitutional amendment, where during the EWC debate, the EFF said, well, we want all land nationalized. And the ANC said, we can't do that. So as a result, the constitution wasn't changed, right? So did the EFF actually want the constitutional amendment? No, I don't really believe they did. So that's actually likely to be the upcoming scenario. However, I thought it was really interesting, Ramon, and a good point for us to all reflect on. Mr. Fixfok-ANC said, the reason we don't want coalition governments is because the DA's coalition governments are really unstable. Just remind me, my friend, how many ANC EFF coalitions have you guys gone through now in Gauteng so far in the last 12 months alone?
I think we've gone through 2 attempted ones and 3 temporary ones, if I remember correctly.
Cool. So it's all the DA that's temperamental, yeah?
I mean,
Funny how that works out that way.
I do think the ANC is correct. Coalitions are messy and not desirable for anyone who wants power. I fully agree with that from the DA perspective or the ANC perspective. But that's the way this cookie crumbles in South Africa. Coalitions will need to be made in some way. So you can say what you want, but in a way, there will be a coalition in the majority of the country in time to come, whether it's 2024 or 2029. And therefore, based on that, I don't know whether we will have something stable in South Africa, which is a good thing as well.
It is a good thing, ladies and gentlemen, and you may all be tempted to all them go, Karen responseless oil immigration, run to some shithole like Australia. But the actual real answer is that nothing extreme can happen during coalition governments because it requires the buy-in of your partners. Actual true democracy is great only insofar as it actually paralyzes the machine from turning tyrannical because nobody can actually ever agree on anything. It's actually only when full agreement and the full amount of power comes down that tyrannical bullshit can actually occur because you've given the power to a Caesar, and that Caesar can obviously rule everybody with an iron fist. With that all being said, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for joining the show today. Hopefully you found it interesting, and we shall leave you with the one thing that we can be guaranteed of come 2024, and that is the water boy of the EFF will still look at Juju like he's in love.
Only you.